Even at the very start of the American War for Independence, it was evident that the Hudson River would be a crucial area to control. In 1775, Thomas Jefferson wrote to his brother-in-law, saying, "By means of Hudson's River, the British mean to cut off all correspondence between the northern and southern colonies." Several days later, Major General Philip Schuyler wrote Congress President John Hancock, saying, "To me, sir, every object, as to importance, sinks almost to nothing when put in competition with the securing of Hudson's River. By controlling the river, you could control who could easily get into and out of New England." New England was considered the head of the colonies, as depicted in Benjamin Franklin's 1754 Join or Die cartoon, in which the head of the snake that represented the colonies was labeled NE for New England. Both sides of the conflict had tried to secure the river for themselves, but neither had permanently succeeded. By 1777, the British had control of both ends of the river. The only thing stopping them from taking complete control of it was a small American force in between. A plan was devised by British General John Burgoyne to divide and conquer the colonies. Burgoyne would come south to Albany from British-controlled Canada, while General Henry Clinton would meet him there, coming north from New York City. Burgoyne moved south and took Fort Ticonderoga on his way, but was stopped at Saratoga by American forces. Clinton did not arrive in time to rescue him, and had also, on his way, encountered the first American attempt at a chain across the Hudson. This chain was called the Fort Montgomery chain, as it had been attached at Fort Montgomery, south of West Point, and had been made earlier that year. The chain itself had been a threat to Clinton, but the fortifications around it weren't. Clinton and his men disembarked from the ship, quickly overpowered the American guards, and removed the chain. They also burned Kingston on their way out. Burgoyne's defeat at Saratoga marked a huge turning point in the Revolutionary War, because it convinced the French to join the war in the Americans' favor. In 1778, General George Washington ordered a new, bigger chain to be made. Engineer Thomas Machen was given the task of creating it. It was decided that West Point was the best spot for the new chain. Not only was it one of the narrowest points on the river, but it also had a difficult S-turn that would force incoming ships to slow down beforehand. Furthermore, the land around West Point was elevated, so cannons around the fort had a better chance of hitting their target. Machen chose Noble, Townsend and Company's Sterling Iron Works, which was run by Peter Townsend, to make the chain. Sterling Iron Works had some of the strongest iron in the colonies. Townsend signed a contract promising a chain about 500 yards long, each link about 2 feet long and 2¼ inches thick, all with only about a month's time to do the job. Sterling was constantly losing men to the military draft, so he also included in the contract that 60 of his men would be exempted from the draft for 9 months, even though this was much more time than Townsend would actually end up needing.
They had trouble getting enough people to fight, so they were constantly kind of scrounging around for what guys can we kind of swipe from the militia to come and help the Continental Army. So they kept trying to swipe the guys at Sterling, and they repeatedly had to explain, you can't take these guys, they're actually physically making the things that the Army needs. And this is in the middle of having to be extremely vigilant, because they can't let people outside of this very close group know what they're doing when they're making the chain, because the British would have sent people up immediately and destroyed the whole thing. But at the same time, they're not having the resources they need. So they decided in January they need to do this chain. They awarded the contract, and I think it's May. May is when they brought it over the Hudson.
After the production started, liquid iron would be drained from blast furnaces into molds carved into the ground twice a day. The ingots of iron that were made from this method were called pigs, because of their apparent resemblance to piglets against the channel spouting directly from the furnace, which was called the sow. These were the ingots of iron that were soon to be shaped into the great chain.
Pig iron is the bar of iron that was produced at the furnace. They would blast the ore, heated up, and it would come out, and from the port, they would make a line in the sand called, into casting sand, and that was called the sow. And off of the sow, which was about this wide, they would make bars that came out, and they were shaped flat on the top and curved from the casting sand, and they all had to be a certain length so that they would fit in the hulls of ships. Those bars were called pig iron, and that was the raw material that would have been taken to a forge and shaped into things.
Okay. Thanks. The forge fires were kept lit 24/7 for almost a month, and by the end of February, the links were done. 10 links at a time were attached together at Sterling Forge, and they were then brought up to Brewster's Forge in New Windsor, where the groups of 10 were connected to make the final chain.
They manufactured the links at the forge site, and then they would put it onto oxen wagons, and those wagons were taken from there up to the Brewster Forge. They originally went a road which became Seven Lakes Road, 7 Lakes through Harriman, but it was a very rough trail, and it took quite a while to get it there. Then they were going to try another route, but then they had snow. Actually had 4 feet of snow. So they had to take the chain links by oxen sledge, which is a large sleigh. And they would take that up the left side of Sterling Lake, through Dutch Hollow, to Trout Brook, which is now called Lakes Road, to Forge Road, which is now called the Rue, and they overnighted in Chester. The next day they went Kings Highway up to Washingtonville, and that road is now called Route 94. And then from there to the Brewster Forge, where they would put the links together and put them on rafts, and they floated that down the river to West Point.
Okay. And how long did that take, usually?
About 2 weeks.
Okay. By April 30th, all the hard work of Thomas Machen, Peter Townsend and his workers, and all of the other people involved was finally accounted for. After only 8 weeks, the chain was stretched across the Hudson. The Great Chain was a stupendous triumph for America because it allowed the colonies to keep a steady grip on the Hudson River in their makeshift capital for the duration of the Revolutionary War. If something had gone wrong in the process, and the chain hadn't made it to West Point, or if the British Army had gotten word of it, then Britain could very well have gained the head of the colonies and a huge advantage over America. The British Army would have sabotaged the plan and made sure that the chain did not see the Hudson. Sterling Forge was also strict in making supplies for the Patriots only, so if Britain had discovered it, then America also could have lost a large supplier of munitions and other necessities, which could have damaged the war effort.
So they did this massive amount of work on these huge chains and dragged them over there in a very short span of time. And that's during the winter too, on terrible roads with ox carts. And they all managed to work together and do it, and the British never figured out until it was too late what was going on. So it was a pretty dangerous thing to try, but they managed to do it.
This is how a quick decision and a great amount of determination secured the most vital region in the colonies and helped the United States win their independence.